This whole antitrust thing, wow, what a wild ride.
All 6-7 hours of it.
When you left last night, you left it running, right? And I was thinking, okay, I'll watch this for a bit. This thing, the timestamp for this event, 6 hours and 36 minutes. They're making Lou Later look short. Oh, baby. And I'm sitting there watching their posture as they're getting grilled, thinking, how can you sit like that? Particularly Pichai, who's sitting with great posture for 5 hours. Oh my God. Anyways, obviously this thing was very painful to watch. Painful for a billion different reasons. See how I use billion? Because it's a bunch of billionaires up there. It was painful for a billion different reasons. It's so bizarre, first off, to see all these billionaires in the same space. And you were talking earlier, you said, I wonder if they, after it's all said and done, if they have a separate call where they can just chat about what just took place. Because really, who are they going to share this experience with? Having been grilled by all these Congress people, politicians, whatever it happens to be. Anyway, so I want to do a breakdown of this. I know people in the world do not want to watch 6 hours and 36 minutes. It's very difficult to do it. So I watched, I would say, an hour and a half. And then this morning I read a bunch of different recaps that attempted to consolidate what took place. The basic premise here is that a number of officials sat in a room with a bunch of billionaires from the biggest tech companies on the other end of what looks like, it's Cisco WebEx conference call. And they aimed to uncover information, to interrogate these billionaires as to whether or not their activities are anti-competition. If they are in some way too powerful and stifling the marketplace through a number of different means. And each criticism that was directed at each billionaire and each company was specific to the behaviors of that company, but always around sort of similar subject matter of, you got a little bit too much control over here, don't you?
Why are you monopolizing everything?
Exactly. Why are you doing so well?
Yeah.
And so it's funny to see these guys who are always at the keynote events telling you how well they're doing. It's funny to have them come on here and talk about, we're not doing that well. They come on here and say, we have tons of competitors. Tim Cook had to put Huawei in his mouth. He had to put Samsung, who he called Samsung.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Oh man. So
like
anyway, it's definitely a role reversal. So you have Zuckerberg from Facebook, Tim Cook from Apple, Bezos obviously from Amazon, and Sundar Pichai from Google. And look, I understand people who were frustrated at the questioning. I get it. That's what I saw a lot of on Twitter. People were saying, these guys have no clue what they're asking about, talking about, and there's a disconnect. And where's the tech expert that can really grill these guys? Because a lot of their questions were these case studies and like one-off events.
Specific.
And it was just a little bit painful to have to watch. I mean, at one point, Zuckerberg corrects one of these officials on an event that actually took place on Twitter, not Facebook. Yeah. And so it's going to be painful. There's going to be some pain associated with it. But it is a topic that requires some attention because these are tremendously powerful companies. And we do need, to a certain extent, I mean, just at least analyze, at least have some awareness over these activities, how they operate, and the benefits and the drawbacks and the consequences of these things. So we're going to kick it off with, I guess we'll do Facebook. Zuckerberg was taking heat. The majority of the heat he took was over the acquisition of Instagram, which seems like a lifetime ago. This was an acquisition that at the time was approved by the FTC. However, these officials said, we don't care if what the FTC said. We're looking at this now. We got fresh eyeballs. We saw what you're doing over here. You got a few more users since that acquisition was approved, and we want to look at it right now. And Zuckerberg, very uncomfortably, in his little webcam setup here, goes on to say, essentially defend himself and say Instagram wouldn't have been Instagram without Facebook. His defense is there were many different photo sharing apps at the time, and basically suggesting that whoever Facebook bought at that time could have become the Instagram of today, which of course you and I know, well, there's a little bit of finesse to that answer because Instagram, there was some legs there. Instagram had some legs. And then they go in, they uncover some emails where he says Instagram could be a problem for us. He says, this kind of, and this the language, these people, they love that type of language. They go, that sounds anti-competitive. You telling me you didn't want to compete? You just wanted to acquire. And of course, in retrospect, the $1 billion that they spent on Instagram looks like a steal of a deal in 2020 because Instagram, you could argue that's the hot property even more so than Facebook in some ways amongst certain demographics. And they seem to be investing a lot as far as features are concerned on Instagram. They put, this guy right here, Zuckerberg, put a lot of attention on Instagram. Must be worth something. I don't know. Must have been a big deal. So they say you neutralize competitors by acquiring them. That's where we step in. That's anti-competitive. And there's a point to be made there. Now, of course, on the flip side, I got to present the flip side. Yeah, maybe they could have squashed Instagram in other ways. Maybe Facebook photos. Now, I'm just saying, I'm not saying it would have happened, could have used its vast reach and tremendous funding to go out and truly disrupt Instagram and put features that people wanted. It's not impossible. And now that Facebook does have Instagram, so many things have changed about Instagram that only Facebook could do. The advertising model as a whole, Facebook plug-in piece to it, the speed at which they could put teams on new features and so forth. So you have to ask yourself, and this is going to be a common thread as we move between the analysis of each of these complaints against each one of these CEOs, you have to ask yourself two things. Have they done something that is potentially anti-competitive? But then as well, who can compete? And that kind of proves the point of the anti-competitive nature. There's the acquisition piece, which is kind of like a sledgehammer.
It's like a buyout
to competition. But then there's the other piece, which is the intellectual component. The things they are doing are so sophisticated and so outside the spectrum of a traditional business by which these anti-competition laws may work very well. Who's the other Google is what I'm trying to say here. If tomorrow they say, Google, slow down. It's too much of the web. You have too much information. We need to distribute this thing. We need to break you into 15 different companies. Could these 15 different companies even do what Google's doing independently on their own? There's so many plugins and tie-ins and all the rest of it. You bring up DuckDuckGo browser. People get mad. People get mad when you chuckle at the alternatives. But it's fair to chuckle because of market share. Like, I understand that there are people who are enthusiastic about the other alternatives, but you have to understand your niche at that point. Google goes beyond the search engine. Google goes into the smartphone operating system. They go into your email. It never ends. Willie do bringing up every search engine that nobody uses. But of course, in the interrogation, Sundar has to say, oh, people, they web search elsewhere. It's a small Google? Are you kidding me? Google's a small-time gig. Time. Yeah, we're still, we kept the garage from the early days. So anyways, Zuckerberg gets nailed on the Instagram thing. The emails come out. He gets uncomfortable. Kevin Systrom, the founder of Instagram, hasn't had the nicest things to say about Zuckerberg. And so maybe they keep hammering away at this one particular thing. And you may be asking as a viewer, well, what ends up happening? Well, they're discussing the potential, and I'm not saying this will happen, but they're discussing the potential to break off Instagram as a separate company. Yeah. That's what's on the table. Big deals, big time stuff. Now, in the case of Apple, almost everything was centered around the App Store, because the App Store is a place in which all in-app purchases result in a 30% cut for Apple, and where all apps that are approved to be in the App Store have to be approved by Apple. And there is a little bit of nuance involved in that, where there are accusations being cast that Apple treats competitive apps to its own in-house stock apps, that it treats them unfairly. That's the word. And I've actually got an article here relating to Telegram, I don't know if you're familiar with Telegram messaging app, and you might have to go over a few tabs to bring it up. But this is actually an antitrust complaint in the EU that's criticizing Apple's restrictions and fees over competing apps specifically. So, of course, Apple has a messaging product, and you come in with the alternative messaging product. Well, you're going to take away from their messaging product. So, hey, Apple, what are your rules around this? And should you be the only governing body over what can be published within the App Store? Now, Tim Cook, his defense, when we started the App Store, we had 500 apps. Today, we have 1.5 million or whatever the number was, attempting to cast this image that they're approving everything that comes through the door. Well, they're not. They're not. A lot of stuff gets kicked out, and there have been disputes from companies that say, hey, this 30% cut is unfair. And Apple then goes and makes the counter argument that, hey, you're reaching nobody without this. We're doing half the gig here.
We built the infrastructure.
We built the whole thing. So you have the both sides represented in this particular complaint, which Telegram, which has more than 400 million users, said Apple must allow users to have the opportunity of downloading software outside of the App Store. They want the ability for the App Store not to be the only way in which you install software on your smartphone. It's an interesting thought, isn't it, Will? Because if you look back at the older operating systems we used, the source of your software could be anywhere.
Yeah, it was like the Wild West.
You can download an application. Now, there are drawbacks to that. You can download some pretty nefarious stuff. Well, you can do that sometimes in the App Store as well when they miss something. But there was no cut. Microsoft didn't get a cut when you downloaded a .exe. Mm-hmm. But imagine if they did. Now, this number, a lot of people may not be aware, it's an enormous number, what this equates to. Apple's App Store fees across the world are estimated to generate more than $1 billion for the company each month. That's some big time numbers. Each month. I mean, that's not even hardware. That's just on the installed base. In its complaint, Telegram took issue with Apple's argument that the App Store Commission keeps it running. So Apple says, we need this App Store Commission. That's how we keep the App Store running. But then Telegram goes on to say in their complaint, well, no, we run this type of thing. We run servers and we have users, and they estimate that the running of the App Store probably costs somewhere in the neighborhood of tens of millions. So we're looking at some profit here, to be clear. Now, hey, that's up to Apple. They're out there competing themselves, but it's an interesting thought process. What should that number be? What is healthy for competition? And how should Apple treat competing software that shows up in the App Store? And where should they be held? Who can even get a word in? Who can say, outside of a specific court case where a company's successful enough to take them to court, where they've got the money to do so, who can say, hey, you denied my app and there's nothing wrong with my app. You just didn't like it because, and they can do that, right? Of course they can. They're a private company. So that's most of what Apple's being accused of has to do with the App Store, not the hardware business. Google, on the other hand, well, I've got another example here of an EU antitrust where the Fitbit deal is facing a probe. And of course, Google acquired Fitbit, $2.1 billion, increasing its footprint. This kind of smells like the Instagram acquisition, where you have these enormous, well, in Fitbit's case, it's the data. You have this enormous data set of users that Google gets to come in and acquire for $2.1 billion. And just like that, hit that multiplier button, and God knows what they can do with this information. But Google was also being attacked for, you remember the Genius thing, where the Rap Genius, where they would have the lyrics
on
the website, and then Google started to publish those lyrics right in the search results so you wouldn't have to visit their site. Mm-hmm. Now, Sundar had to actually come up with a defense for that, because the company Genius, they actually embedded a secret code inside of those lyrics so that they could prove that Google wasn't deriving those lyrics from elsewhere, that they were just sweeping the site and then publishing that there. They had a similar accusation about Yelp with Yelp reviews. Google is your highway on the internet. And if they want to stick a sign in your way and that sign stops you from having to make a turn to get that information and bring that value to somebody else, they can do it and no one can stop them. And this is where this power thing comes in. And this is where this analysis comes in. So Google's got a ton of potential avenues for attack when it comes to the anti-competitive conversation, maybe the most. However, Politico.com thinks Amazon will have the most to lose from this particular showdown. Bezos, the last billionaire of the group that was on display. And by the way, I think he may have had the best background with at least he has some objects back there and some wood furniture, because I have to say, I really expected more out of Tim Cook's. He just had, it looked like a prison interrogation, police department interrogation, frumpy plants, and just some wall panels. Sundar, it's between Sundar and Jeff for the nicest background in my estimation here. Zuckerberg was a little too close to the camera lens as he normally is. Zuckerberg wins the resolution battle, though. I think he was the clearest of the bunch, whether that's a good thing or not, depending on how you want to analyze this type of setup. But anyways, the reason that many think that Amazon has the most to lose is because of the effect that Amazon can have in a tangible way on physical small business and retail. And retail, my goodness, retail is under attack for a number of reasons. And this lockdown has really expedited that process and it's the reason Amazon stock is just to the moon.
Yeah. The brick and mortar
is a disaster right now. And no one is even trying to dispute it. And the question is how much of that disaster has to do with Amazon and our ability to get things elsewhere. In the early days of Amazon, there's a lot of talk around anti-competitive behavior in the pricing of books, so much so that there was an actual case made about it with the Apple's. There was discussions going on when Apple was doing their bookstore, and a lot of it came out in public. But the word was that Amazon was selling books below cost in order to completely cripple companies that had higher expenditure and smaller bank accounts, that they could do that for a while to build in the habit for you that you would always go to Amazon in the future and they'd get their profits back later. And famously, they didn't even turn profits for a tremendous amount of time. And so he's asked questions specifically, hey, do you sell Amazon Echo at a loss? And he says, no, not at a loss, only when it's on sale. And then you're like, when it's on sale, you control when it goes on sale.
Right.
So you can sell things at a loss. And look, I have to say something right now.
Okay.
I'm a fan of these companies. I really don't know what we would do if people weren't out there solving these enormous problems. And one thing that this lockdown has really exposed is how fragile our world is. When the message came out, hey, you're going to have to stay home, what did we all lean on? Technology.
Yes.
We all said, well, the only way to interact is going to be through the internet. The only way to participate in any type of work is going to be web conference. The only way to go to school is going to be Zoom. The only way to get my toilet paper is going to be Amazon. And of course, Amazon increasingly into the food and all the rest of it. No one else had the infrastructure to deliver the thing. Are they too powerful? Yes. Why are they too powerful? Because what they're doing is super hard. It's super hard. What are these officials going to do? Are they going to head over to Walmart? Are they going to force engineers from Amazon to work at Walmart so they can improve their services, so they can deliver things faster and essentially do this is crazy stuff. Who's the other Google? Who's the other Amazon? Who's the other Facebook? Are they too powerful? Absolutely. Do we have any other options? Unfortunately, no. Not easy ones.
Yet.
Not easy solutions to this stuff.
Yep.
So you want to break them up and bust them up. Do services for people get better? Man, I don't know. I don't know. But I do understand the consequence of this. You let them keep getting more powerful, and who knows what they do with it, Will. You let this thing keep going unbridled, and then what do the prices look like? Who gets to call the shots? They can get to a scale we've never seen before as far as a retailer is concerned. When he said the everything store, and that sounds really exciting, maybe the long-term everything store is kind of scary.
Yeah.
Well, maybe when
happen.
when the everything store turns into the only store, that could be a problem. But of course, in his defense, he referenced a number of other big retailers, and he also referenced how small Amazon actually is compared to the entire retail footprint. So there's no easy thing going on here. I'm just attempting to break down exactly what's going on. I don't want a world without Amazon or Google or Apple or Facebook. I don't use Facebook that much, but Instagram's a decent app. But you understand what I'm saying is these are services that people do derive tremendous value from. Google, it's crazy. I've thought about this before, trying to figure out what the most useful or important applications are. Prior to Gmail, whatever people were doing with email nightmare, and prior to maps, what people were doing for navigation, it's hard. You just take it for granted. You assume that there's plenty of other amazing options, and it's just, it's tough. It's a really tough thing to figure out, and I don't know what they're going to do here. I don't know how they're going to manage it, and unfortunately, it appears that the right questions and the right people are missing to solve these complicated problems. Yeah. Because they're probably working for these companies and not working for the government.
What do they get out of it right now? Like they have these hearings, but it's like it doesn't seem like things are changing.
Yeah, well, like I said, they can make threats and they can continue this investigation and interrogation, and the potential does exist to disrupt these businesses, but it does seem somewhat unlikely, or at least somewhat difficult to figure out how that would happen in any kind of productive way for anyone involved, whether it's the public, the government, or these companies. Tech is its whole own thing. It's too late is what it is. Maybe they could have done this. Maybe had this happened a decade ago in the early stages of this thing where they said, oh, we see this is potential to get really big and we want to have 5 or 6 versions of these things. Yeah. But now we're so dependent and reliant on it. Google is a utility. Amazon is a utility. It does save us in all kinds of circumstances. Yeah. And now you want to talk about it? Now you want to disrupt these services that we all depend on?
I mean, all these people probably have iPhones.
Of course they
Androids.
do. They're all running. They're all relying on the services. It's funny. This came to my mind when I was watching it. All these elected officials, well, these are Congress people, but they're all part of parties as well that rely on nominations, and political ad spend has moved in a tremendous way towards the web, buying Facebook ads, Google ads, and all the rest. They're customers too.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
They're playing the game.
How weird is that? Did they have a relationship outside of this interrogation? That they have a reliance on these companies like regular citizens do for the services they need to survive in a modern environment.
Yeah.
Wild times. Anyway, speaking of that, why don't we lighten the mood? Okay. Bezos is under attack, so he does exactly what you would do if you were being criticized for being too powerful. You buy your next door neighbor's house to add to your inventory of homes that you own. A $10 million house in a nearby property to one of his properties in Beverly Hills. He's got enormous properties in D.C., Seattle, where he's also famously bought up his neighbors, because when you're really, really rich, that's what you start doing. I don't know.
Neighborhoods?
Yeah, I don't know if you knew that.
Not yet, no.
Yeah, you didn't.
But soon.
For you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Back in April, Bezos paid a record $165 million for David Geffen's Jack Warner Estate 10-acre compound in Beverly Hills. Now he's added the neighboring property to that property at $10 million. Some say it may be a home office, a guest house, or maybe he'll just knock it down to have a bigger yard. Who really knows? When you have that much money, you run out of things to do with it. And again, it's just a funny juxtaposition, this news story to the last one. We're really not doing that well. Okay, we're kind of doing all right. In 2014, Bezos paid $13 million for a rundown home next door to his former Beverly Hills compound. Those other properties were actually obtained by Mackenzie Scott, of course, his ex. She accumulated some of that property as well. He is the planet's richest human. On any given day, depending on what's going on in the stock market. In the late 90s, he acquired several properties around his Seattle estate, and he also owns 4 apartments in the same Art Deco style Manhattan building. 3 of them acquired from music executive Tommy Mottola. So he's got to have 4 apartments in the same building in Manhattan as well.
Of course.
I guess you know what it is, Will. At some point, you get a little bit rich and you start to acquire cars, let's say. You start to collect cars. And then you get stupid, enormous, ridiculous. Well, maybe not stupid. I mean, it's not stupid. I mean stupid rich in the sense that you have to start acquiring slightly more unusual things like your neighbor's property.
Yes. That's what you do. You're
but
a millionaire.
What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? I guess you could do what his ex-wife did and give a lot of it away. Although I'm pretty sure he gives a lot of it away too. But there you go. $10 million on the neighbor's house. Willie Doo's going to start running that program sometime soon. Speaking of billions of dollars, TikTok, wow, this escalated quickly. Remember a couple of days ago, they were going to give $200 million to creators. They got a couple of news stories out of it. We talked about it. And then they said, no. That wasn't enough press. We're going to go for $2 billion, not $200 million. And I think there was even a stopgap where they talked about maybe half, maybe it was $1 billion, but they keep increasing this number. I think TikTok has realized if they put out these stories, their creators are going to stick around. And if their creators stick around, then the public is going to demand that those apps stick around, and they're going to be more upset if something happens to the app. So our last story talked about potentially moving certain assets, maybe the company entirely, to the United States as one method for alleviating some of the pressure coming from the U.S. government and other governments globally. But then the other piece of the pie is if there's any fear from creators that the app may be unstable or not a place to make a long-term investment, then it won't matter what happens with the government because the communities will move on their own in absence of the content that they're looking for and the creators that they came to follow and popularize. So TikTok appears to realize this is the case, and they are offering up big money now to creators globally, not just in the US, to hang around on the platform. TikTok is planning to support the next generation of talent on its platform, $2 billion creator fund. TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube all want high-profile creatives with millions of fans. Yeah, I wonder why. That makes a lot of sense. TikTok's new fund is designed to help influencers generate revenue on its platform. You're going to have to submit an application, as we referenced in the past, but that was only in terms of U.S. creators. This is now a global situation. In Europe, TikTok will give creators $70 million over the next year and $300 million over the next 3 years. And in the U.S., $1 billion over the next 3 years and then double that globally. I don't know how it will be distributed elsewhere in smaller places, but I think this makes a lot of sense. I think this is exactly what they should be doing. If you have creator commitment and they're in a particular geography that could be a tumultuous place for you to operate, they're going to go to bat for you. They're going to keep publishing. They may even write petitions and sign petitions. They may even talk to those guys behind the wooden pedestals and say, you can't ban this app. This is an American success story. See me? I'm an American creator. And check out my business. I got 17 employees because they cut me a check. And now I'm creating content for the world. An American export. Media, baby. The media business. I don't know. Anyway, point being, TikTok's going to invest in its creators. And I think it's a good move in order to ease some of the apprehension around remaining on TikTok. It's a funny way how that works, you know. You got guys like Ninja, they say, I can't be over there. I can't be on TikTok. Where's my data going? But then at the same time, on the side, TikTok starts talking to some people directly and saying, look, I want you to check out this briefcase real quick. And to be fair, for a lot of these people, they're trying to figure out, what is my business? What do I do? Yeah. They're fresh to it. They're new to it. And they do have to figure something out long-term if they're going to do it professionally. And other platforms have done this very successfully, including the one that we're on here, including myself on YouTube. You start generating revenue. You can take it seriously. You can create more content more often, reliably, without feeling like, oh, this is risky.
Right.
It's a key piece, the business piece, and other social media platforms are catching up and figuring it out. Good content, it's going to cost some money. That's the bottom line. I mean, though a lot of people would dispute whether or not TikTok's got good content, but that's up to them. That's up to them to decide. Huawei overtakes Samsung as the top handset maker in the world. How about this story, given everything that's going on with Huawei as far as exports are concerned? This figure here is based almost entirely on the domestic Chinese market, which has rebounded sooner than the rest of the world because of the pandemic having originated there and then spreading elsewhere later on. That the domestic economy in China has bounced back a little bit faster.
They opened up earlier.
Yeah, they're back to business to a certain extent, and this has allowed Huawei, even having seen a pretty significant decline elsewhere in the world. Let's see here. Yes, domestic sales rose by 8%, but Huawei's overseas shipments fell by 27%. So, and that's the area that could fall even further. Most importantly, because of losing the Play Store, losing Google Apps, which elsewhere in the world matter a lot. In China, don't matter a lot. They have all the domestic apps. They don't care. There's very little Google footprint in China, which was another thing that came up in the antitrust, because one of the Congress people was obsessed with the China component, suggesting that Google was more interested, that any of these brands were sort of bowing to Chinese requests and whatever else. Yeah. But anyways,
CCP.
Anyways, so domestic sales went up a little bit. Now other companies like Samsung posted a 30% drop overall because they had weak demand in markets like Brazil, the United States, and Europe. Those are huge, huge markets, of course, and those markets have been crippled. People holding on to their pennies. They're not trying to buy flagship smartphones when there's so much uncertainty in the world. So that's kind of expected, but it's allowed Huawei to kind of slip into that spot. And it just showcases the scale of the Chinese market. Enormous marketplace that on the back of that alone, and also potentially, this is speculation, but the power of patrioticness. Is that a word? Anyway, patriotism.
Sure. Yeah.
We're going to go with all of it because that conversation started to come up as Huawei was running into issues elsewhere in the world. That and we've talked a lot about the slimmer market share Samsung has almost no footprint in China, and even Apple, nothing in comparison to Huawei. So you start this. I mean, people are watching the news in China. They say everybody's boycotting Chinese products. What happens within the domestic market? That's your brand. Those are, the facilities. They're the local employer. You're going to support that brand in the face of this being presented with this type of conflict.
Right.
So you see this increase in domestic sales, not a decrease. So it's kind of there's so much interesting stuff going on right now with people's mood around technology and how technology has now become a piece, a political. It's almost representative of your stance. In India, it's something similar. It's representative of your support for a particular agenda or a particular side of a conflict. It's very bizarre. This is really brand new in tech. It's happened elsewhere in other product segments, but in tech, I've been in this now for 10 years, covering it here on YouTube in one way or another, and it's hotter right now. That subject, that topic, the patriotic component,
the loyalty,
the loyalty. I mean, I don't know if we're going to stay here, but it's also hard to see a way out. How countries attempting to own more of the process of the manufacturing of these devices, have more sovereignty over their networks and their 5G implementation. And it's just, anyway, Huawei is definitely not done. They may be done in some places, but in China, they are not done. That's important to know. Now, one place where they may be done is Brazil, but only if Brazil is willing to take the advice of the United States or make the decision on their own that they see some sort of an issue with Huawei getting the contract for the cell networks there, the 5G networks there, which is that sort of started the whole thing. Who gets the 5G networks as far as the hardware is concerned? Now, Brazil, you may not know this, Will, but according to Reuters here, this particular article, your favorite news source, by the way, that's an inside thing that nobody remembers. Do you want to just let people know real quick what happened there?
Well, I called it routers. All right? I called it routers.
Anyways. Brazil does a lot of business with China, a lot of exports to China. Yeah. So there you have that relationship that could be in jeopardy, and they're right in the middle, again, between the U.S. and China beef. It seems like so many countries are in the middle of that beef right now. The president or prime minister of Brazil, apparently has close ties to Trump and has an ear to Trump. Hey, what do you say? What do you think? However, the local economy depends on those exports to China. So you're in between a rock and a hard place, as they like to say. Mm-hmm. You want to appease one side, and now there's a new threat out there. What is the quote? Brazil may face consequences if it gives Huawei 5G access, and that's coming from a U.S. ambassador. So they're saying don't do it. You're saying, hey, we want to appease the United States here because there's the United States, obviously another big customer, and they have a bunch of money, $60 billion to boost overseas development financing, which that could go to Brazil if they are willing to play ball and abide by whatever suggestions the U.S. is putting out there. Now, they're not stating it as a requirement like that, but you have to know if you appease them on this one thing, there may be some benefit on the other side, favors and all the rest of it. But then on the flip side, you got the threats coming from China. What did China say? A Huawei executive warned that Brazil could suffer years of delay in deploying a 5G telecom network at higher costs if it succumbs to mounting U.S. pressure to snub the Chinese equipment supplier. So Huawei picks up the phone. They say, okay, here's how this is going to hurt you this way. Or China picks up the phone and says, okay, you don't want to use our equipment in your networks. We're not going to buy whatever it is we're buying from you. So it's a tough spot for Brazil. We'll see how that plays out. PUBG Mobile has decided to host user data in India amid possibility of getting banned. So they're supposedly PUBG Mobile is one of these apps that's under scrutiny, not banned yet, but under scrutiny in India for its treatment of data, user data, and the location of that user data. Where is that information flowing to? And that was one of the issues with some of those early bans, the TikTok ban and some other massive bans. Now India didn't stop with the scrutiny in the App Store. They went through their fine-tooth comb and they say, okay, PUBG, you're next. Well, they put them on the list for further inspection. And so PUBG's sitting there with a tremendous user base in India. Indian fans are telling me this is huge. It's the biggest game. Everybody plays it, all the rest of it. And so PUBG is trying to get out ahead of a potential ban, saying, we're going to start making changes right now to how we're treating user data. So maybe we can appease the Indian government and alleviate some of this scrutiny, some of this pressure. And so one way to do that is to keep, or at least say you're going to keep user data. I don't know how long that takes to transition those servers. Keep it local so they can't accuse you of doing anything nefarious with this data, or so that India can't say, oh, this is some kind of a national security threat, which has been, that's the words being thrown around when the data leaves the country. No one really knows exactly how it's a security threat. There's been talks of intellectual property, but when it comes to user data in PUBG, you're sitting there thinking, what kind of national security threat is there? But you don't know the way it reaches into the device and what it's actually. Right. It's really hard to read these terms and to know where the extent of these permissions, let's say. The average person doesn't know. So anyways, PUBG is aiming to get out ahead of that. It's probably a good idea, and it showcases how many of these companies could be treating these scenarios. I think the story we talked about yesterday with TikTok, probably the best solution that's been pitched up until this point. Why don't you just let the U.S. investors own that piece and figure it out domestically? You're done. Look, here's the data. There's the servers. No problem. Nothing leaving. All your TikTok activity in the U.S. happens in the U.S.
Yes.
This could be a futuristic approach. U.S. users, data U.S. PUBG users in India, data India. Mm-hmm. So there's a way potentially to do this, but you're going to have to create some pretty robust structures and walls in order to prove to these governments that data is staying where you say that it's staying. We'll see what happens with PUBG. Hopefully it sticks around, and obviously people enjoy it in India. Hopefully they can find a way to make it work. But I'm sure some people are boycotting anyways because of the 10-cent piece and everything else. Xiaomi is working on something kind of interesting. These are earbuds that store inside of your smartphone. Now, this is super early. We're talking patent area. But however, if you scroll down, you get a nice little graphic here supplied, courtesy of Let's Go Digital, which shows you how those earbuds may work. In the top of the device, as you can see, the earpiece, so it looks like it's a two-piece structure with a little hinge on it. The earpiece connects to a longer cylinder, which probably has the communication components in it for Bluetooth, and then a tiny little earpiece which pivots on a hinge after you pull it out and then flattens when you insert it into the phone, top part of the phone. This is going to be hard for people who are just listening and can't see the graphic to figure out, but essentially just it creates a really portable thing that once it's in your phone, you hardly notice it. Now, the cool part about this is that when it's in the phone, it actually can act as extra loudspeakers. It could be speakers spitting out audio, regardless if it's in your ear or on your phone. Now, problems that could arise from this, obviously the hygiene component. These things are in your pocket, in your phone. You got all the lint and whatever else going into the grills, which appear to be facing upwards, and then you shove those in your ears. Most of the fully wireless earbuds, if not all, have some sort of a case to keep them enclosed when you put them in your pocket. That wouldn't be the case here with this particular smartphone. But it is interesting nonetheless, because how often does that thing occur where you need some headphones real quick and you don't have them on you? And in this case, they could be right there, ready to go in the phone.
And they're charged.
They're always charged, and they're charged off of the bigger battery that's inside of the phone. So there would be some engineering difficulties with figuring out the right way to do this, but it's interesting nonetheless to rethink some of this stuff. I'm not saying I'd be first in line to buy this, but I like to see these new ideas, even if they're only executed in the form of patents. Mm-hmm. Sony PlayStation 5 reportedly have a shortened life cycle. No, don't misinterpret this like I misinterpreted the lineup article from the Microsoft executive. It doesn't mean that the thing's not going to last as long. It means that they're not going to produce it for as long as they have the previous versions. Consoles, they stay around for a while, 6-7 years. Mm-hmm. And therefore the game development, everything is predicated on how long is this console going to be a thing. It is a bit strange to me they hang around as long as they do, considering how fast things move in other consumer electronics areas like smartphones or even PCs for that matter. You get a new graphics card every 5 minutes, and you got to have this old console forever. So they always come out and say it's next generation, it's got everything, and then sure enough, it's only next generation for a short period of time. So apparently, even though Sony expects this thing to be wildly popular, they're expecting to ship 120 million PlayStation 5 units over the next 5 years, which is actually double the number of Xbox Series X models that Microsoft is planning to ship. Some figures estimate that Sony may ship even more than that, up to 170 million units. We will have to leave that. It remains to be seen, is what I want to say. What's actually going to happen, but it does appear that there is a sort of a renewed interest in the at-home gaming. Mobile was grabbing everything for a while, and then people got locked down, and all of a sudden VR started to boom, consoles started to boom, video game spending started to boom. So maybe they do move 170 million units. But they claim that the life cycle for this particular model is going to be 5 years instead of the 6 or 7 that the PS4, 3, and 2 all had. So I'm not sure why that's the case. Maybe they want to be more up to date with the consoles, do them more frequently. Maybe they make some good money off of it. Maybe the renewed interest in consoles means you can flip them more frequently and actually extract some cash from people. I'm sure there could be a number of reasons for why this is the case, but it appears PlayStation 5 is a 5-year console. But this is according to the back-end supply chain in Taiwan.
Well, maybe there could be like a spec bump.
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
like the next generation, but just like upgraded specs.
Maybe. Yeah, who knows what it means exactly? It's coming from the inside. They could be wrong. Maybe the thing is a hit and they're still selling good numbers 5 years in and they say, let's order up another 2 years worth.
Right.
And they have always done the slim versions and the sort of incremental versions, or maybe it's just a recognition that things are moving quickly and it's time to upgrade the thing more frequently. Who knows? We'll find out. This is an interesting one. Sony puts out a video on their new TVs, X90H, XH90 series, and you'll see something very interesting in this clip as you let it play. Well, the TVs look awesome, obviously, sound and picture and harmony. It's all very beautiful. There, pause it right there. Ready for PlayStation 5. So this is interesting. Is this a designation that's going to be on multiple TVs? Is it only Sony TVs? Can other TV manufacturers apply to be what would be considered ready? Optimized. Yeah. I remember in the early days of HD, they would say HD ready or 4K ready, I think came at some point after that. So ready for PlayStation 5 seems to indicate in the form of this video, this is my first exposure to it, 4K 120 FPS. That's pretty crazy for a large format display. Now there's a star there and your playhead is kind of covering up the fine print. The star goes down to the fine print. 4K 120 FPS game HDMI input based on how dare you, Will? How dare you? Based on internal testing conditions may differ in real-time usage. So they're putting a little thing in there, and then they also say it'll be available via future firmware update. So you're going to have to do this firmware update. You can probably buy the TV and then do the firmware update when the PS5 actually ships. And then the other one that I like, low input lag, 7.2 milliseconds. You never hear TV manufacturers talking about input lag, but it's this terrible thing that once you get a TV, you learn about real quick that some are just not good for gaming, large format displays, because input lag, just to explain it real quick, you have an input on your controller, and by the time it shows up on the screen, there's so much processing happening to that HDMI signal that it takes a second for you to see it. This can be so frustrating in a game. It can make a game unplayable, to be honest, or at least give you an inability to compete because you're seeing things later. This is often why many gamers, game enthusiasts, even those on consoles, will opt for a computer monitor with an HDMI input for their console, because computer monitors typically have less processing and therefore less lag because you got to use a mouse with it. 7.2 milliseconds is really good for a large format display, HDR display, 4K display. This is, I guess, because of the 90. Is this a 90-inch display? I don't know how big it is, but it's going to be a big one. It's a big screen TV anyways. It's also going to have Android TV built in, and now it's got me all curious of what would be the optimal next generation console TV. And did Sony potentially just nail it through the combination of high frame rate, high resolution, and low input lag? I love it. I think it's lovely. I still like the game from the couch every so often. I want to relax every so often. Call me crazy.
Well, it's normal.
That's normal. Okay, I'm glad. Google is preparing their camera application 7.5 with some new features, including motion blur, audio zoom, and flash intensity. Now, this is obviously not official. This is somebody peeking in as they do, where, I mean, there's always places like XDA developers. This is on 9 to 5 Google. For months now, we've been tracking the Pixel 4a as Google's next Android hardware release. Earlier this month, our team uncovered direct mentions to Google also launching a Pixel 5 and Pixel 4a with no signs of a Pixel 5 XL. Now they peeked in a little further. What exactly? They've decompiled the latest version of an application that Google uploaded, and then they decompile the APK and look through it for interesting strings. Okay?
Sifting.
Yeah, sifting. Doesn't that sound super exciting? You could do that with your morning coffee, maybe a breakfast sandwich, and you start sifting through some APKs. They found a feature, a mysterious new string, which references lasagna. And lasagna is supposedly the code word for a new motion blur functionality, which aims to have the Pixel camera behave more like a DSLR in the way that it treats moving images. So to create a more natural type of motion blur.
Okay.
From what we gather, motion blur looks to offer DSL-like quality to photos of moving targets, similar to how portrait mode simulates the bokeh effect. The given feature is still listed under the code name, but it will probably likely be available on all these next generation models that are also listed in here. Audio zoom is the other feature that they found, and flash intensity. With audio zoom, we've seen this on other smartphones. This is almost like a shotgun effect to the microphone behavior. When you're zooming into an image optically or digitally in your camera app, it's able also to focus in the audio on whatever it is you're zooming at. And this has a, depending on the way that you use it, it can have a magical kind of output, but other times it's a little bit wonky. But Google's gonna do their version of it. And flash intensity, this is kind of weird because Google has moved far away from the flash and pitched the night mode. Who needs a flash? Forget about a flash. Now they're going to let you control the intensity of the flash instead of just on or off. Seems a bit odd, but for a company that's been so night mode. But I guess it's kind of cool because part of the reason the flash is unusable is because it only has one intensity level.
Yeah. I use the flash for just like a lamp.
Yeah, flashlight.
Yeah.
I know that's what most people do with it these days. But anyways, they're going to have, maybe you could have a dimmer night light or set the mood, with your Pixel flash. Verizon is launching new LTE home internet service. The wireless company's internet service will be available in Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, Virginia, and Kentucky. This is for rural areas. Everybody wants to figure out how to get the remaining people online and get some fast connections over there. And a wire is not always feasible. Elon wants to send up the Starlink satellites, ruining people's photos. And he's talking about some pretty hefty speeds. Verizon thinks they can just come in with the LTE 4G. Obviously, this is a precursor to what could eventually happen with 5G if you're comfy with it, and whether depending on where you land on the various conspiracy theories about what 5G is actually doing to you, Will. It's there's some crazy stuff out there about 5G.
Yeah, I don't want to read about it.
No, you don't have to. But anyways, so for the time being, it's 4G LTE. And this is going to connect people in rural areas. They're going to get speeds of 25 to 50 megabits per second. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's likely a lot better than whatever they're getting right now. And they're going to, it's going to cost $40 a month, or between $40 and $60 a month to get that service. I like to see people getting connected in rural areas. Often those places can be really cut off. You can have these huge dead zones from a connectivity perspective, and it can be an isolating experience. If you're a young person coming up in a rural situation and you can't even hop online reliably and interact with the rest of the world that way. I mean, depending on what you interact with, maybe it's a good thing. But in some cases, particularly with education, learning about things, hopping onto the various resources that are out there to become an expert in something. Yeah. If you got a slow connection, if you've ever experienced it, you just don't even want it. You're just done with it.
Yeah, rather not have it than a really slow connection.
It can be very painful. So this should be an upgrade for some people. But like I said, once the 5G starts rolling out wirelessly and those speeds can now mimic what you're getting on a wire, that's going to be a huge equalizer for those that aren't worried about whatever else 5G is supposedly doing to you. Halo, this is you. This is going to get you fired up. This is your segment of the show. This is you when you dream about Halo, you wake up in the morning, you check the Halo news. I'm sure you've already seen this. The developers have responded to some of the criticism around Halo. I kind of feel bad for Halo. I don't know why. I just think, yeah, maybe you expected more, but holy moly, people just come after the developers directly. They go right at them on Twitter, the actual human being who's been working on the thing. A flat image, you suck. I guess
I will hurt you.
Why should I expect any different? People.
No, that's the internet.
That's just the way it goes. I mean, people come at me, they come at you. Anybody you can come at is getting hit up. Maybe we all need to ease up. I'm not really sure, but anyways, this guy, this developer on Twitter appears to be taking the criticism very seriously, and that's one area where criticism pays off. Is it can help guide you into making improvements as well. Now, like I told you before, I don't know how much they can do here. I feel like people are going to be dissatisfied because it's just so much weight to this title. So I just don't imagine how people are going to come out when the game ships, which is not that far from now, and say, okay, fine, we're happy now. That's going to be a tough one, given where people's minds are right now. But Dan Chosich, director of Halo Infinite, responded to a frustrated Twitter follower who was disappointed with the reveal. He said, I've been in your shoes. I know what it's like to have expectations built and feel let down, he said. I want you to know your voice matters and is heard. You're not falling on deaf ears. I always want to live up to the legacy that Bungie pioneered. I personally care a lot about honoring that. So, I mean, a very heartfelt.
Oh, yeah.
This guy definitely, I mean, take the words for what they are, but he doesn't come across as flippant. He doesn't come across as dismissive. He comes across as really wanting to make a good product. Now, it could be damage control, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and suggest that this guy wants to make a good game. He wants to impress you as a gamer, and he wants to do justice to the original as much as he can. Yeah. We'll see what they can do. They've said, hey, that was early. That was an early thing. It's not the final product. Give us a chance. But I don't know. Sometimes this goes the way where people will be more sympathetic and say, well, I'm glad that I was heard. And then sometimes it goes the other way where they say, oh, you're listening to me? That means I have your attention. That means you're weak. That means I'm about to eat you alive and hit you with everything.
Ammunition.
Yeah, so it's tough to know. But look, I think they're definitely going to put out something better than the demo or the gameplay, official gameplay preview. But will it be up to people's standards, or is the standard an impossible standard given the fact that just where people are at with what they want in a Halo Infinite game? Maybe. Call of Duty Warzone and Modern Warfare are going to be banning more cheaters. This is a whole new thing to me because I played a little bit of Warzone and everybody was talking about cheaters and cheating and I felt like I hadn't heard about, I hadn't been bombarded with cheating talk around an online title in such a long time, maybe ever. And so I did look into it a little bit to figure out exactly how people were cheating. I was curious about it. And you have people with different texture packs and things and eliminating textures in the game and all kinds of ways in which people cheat. Now, I was doing low tech cheating. Well, no, don't ban me. It's not actually cheating, but I remember when they first launched solo mode and they had the choppers in the game, I could just take a chopper, and I loved it. I found it to be so much fun. I could take a chopper and then just fly around for most of the game. Well, you have to accumulate a couple things. You got to get a gas mask for one, and maybe a med kit. But anyways, what you do, you can't have a gas mask and a med kit at the same time, can you? Anyway, you need the gas mask, and then you take the chopper, and you're flying around until end game. And then when the game is ending and the ring is shrinking so small, you just stay up directly above. And oftentimes, by the time you drop off, if you've got full health and a gas mask and the other person was just in a gunfight, they're going to die off quicker in the storm once it's completely consumed the place than you falling from the destroyed chopper. And I won 2 times like this on solo. Just because, there's a natural thing where you want to just see where the boundaries are of the game. Yeah. Like, can you pull off these weird kind of things?
Without technically cheating.
And then shortly after, they got rid of the chopper in solo mode. and the fun was
You're
gone.
like, I quit.
All that fun was gone. So, but anyways, this is deeper than that. People are running third-party software, and I think they're really finding legit ways to cheat. The studio has explained in a new Twitter post that it's going to ban even more players for manipulating the game. The full statement, which you can see above, explains that any bans are related to unauthorized manipulation of game data. All right, I wasn't doing that, Will. Any third-party software being used to mod or hack can result in a ban. This includes aimbots, texture hacks, and trainers, all banned. And you should not attempt to modify any of the camouflage patterns you've obtained, nor should you try to alter the memory on your system to get new gear. So they actually outlined, you do any of these things, you're banned. And I actually heard of a number of high-profile gamers with big audiences that had been leaving the game because they were so upset about hackers. So you got to believe that Call of Duty wants to put an end to that to keep those individuals satisfied, and also just to create a playing field that most people want to participate in. Because this stuff, I mean, you're running aimbot software, wall hacks, trainers, texture hacks. I've seen the texture hacks. They're kind of crazy. Guys they drive around in a Jeep, and the Jeep is invisible. Oh. It's crazy stuff. Anyways, because then they can target the person better, because certain textures are eliminated from the game. Don't go do any of this. You might get your thing banned. But anyways, it's crazy what people get up to in their spare time. I can barely find the time to just turn the game on and have myself a half hour. Yeah. Let alone get into the texture hacks. Here's a cool device, a new device that allows users to control computers with their tongues. This looks sort of like a retainer, and then it has a module where your tongue goes, and of course there's a transmitter which is going to wirelessly move those inputs to whatever device you're interacting with. Now, I first saw this, and I thought to myself, what are you going to do with this? You only have a tiny little thing you can depress and move up and down with your tongue. But then I thought to myself, man, you don't actually need that much movement to control an interface. Now, that interface may have to be custom made for your particular scenario, but if it was, you could go through lists pretty effectively and select options just with an up and down movement. Now, of course, this device here is targeted at people who can't use their other extremities, a person who's paralyzed or something like this, or a person who is occupied controlling other things with their hands and wants an extra input. There's a demonstration video on the bottom here. It's called Embrace. It's a thesis by Dorothy. I should get her name. It was Dorothy Klassen. And what you'll see here is she actually installs it looks sort of like a mouth guard or a retainer into her mouth. And then there's an earpiece that wraps around a little wire that goes between the earpiece and the mouthpiece. And then this little ball slides up and down on the inside of this mouth component. Then you can control that with your tongue. So I'm thinking up, down to scroll a list, and then maybe depress it for a click. That's where my head is at. But the demonstration here is actually a game. It's a game of Pong, and maybe that's coming up in a short moment here. Yeah, here we go. And so she's able to control the
Tong.
Yeah, she called it Tong instead of Pong, obviously. And what are those called? What would you call the character? It's not a character. It's the little rectangle that hits the ball in traditional Pong. She can control it up and down with her tongue. So anyways, it's going to be interesting for people who have disabilities, and it's going to be interesting for, I don't know, just as an alternate input method for special work tasks, and also for physical therapy. For people who lose their ability to use their tongue to talk or something like this and are retraining it, this could be a way to at least have something interesting as a retraining software with a tongue-based input.
Very
Anyway, maybe you pair that with the Neuralink, and I don't know, you're just lying down. And I don't know what you're doing. Well, Panasonic is going to boost energy density of its batteries for Tesla. They have a tremendous partnership. They claim it's going to be a 20% boost on density. You know what this means, Will? Density means longer range, smaller footprint, an opportunity to re-engineer your vehicles.
Bigger fires.
Hey, man.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, potentially that too. It's a plan for the next 5 years. This fall, there's going to be a small increase of about 5% density coming to Tesla's Gigafactory in Nevada, which Panasonic actually operates. It's an interesting partnership. They're in there making the batteries, but it's Tesla's factory. And then further down the line, I don't know if it's 10 years. I don't know if this report actually states when. Oh, in 5 years. Yeah. So within 5 years, a 20% improvement. Within the next year, a 5% improvement. The best cells they currently make, the most dense cells, are actually only in the Model 3 and Model Y, the newer models. Once again, lending to the conversation around how dated the Model S and X are. And so those are likely to be on the docket for an upgrade. But the other piece is that they're going to move away from cobalt. They plan to have cobalt-free batteries in 2 to 3 years. Cobalt-free version would cut reliance on a costly and controversial component. It currently makes batteries stable, but poses ethical issues given controversial labor conditions in the top producer, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So there's a push to move away from cobalt reliance, and that's another part of the future plans of Panasonic as we increase the density and the range of our future electric vehicles. Speaking of electric vehicles, I don't know if you remember the Sony Vision S concept vehicle that they showed off at CES last year. Sony said, it's just a showcase. We're not making an electric vehicle. It's a proof of concept, that's all. And they're still saying that, but now they're driving the car around and doing test runs, and you can actually see that in this video. Vision S arrived in Tokyo for development, and it looks sort of like a promo video. It looks like they're sort of excited about this car. Now, I always like to ask you, Will, what you think of the design of any new or competing electric car, because you're the guy that just knows. You just look at the internet and you just know things. And so now I have to have you weigh in on this one, the Vision S. Where does it stack up for you?
I like it. I like the front of it.
Wow.
It looks very modern.
Can you please contain your excitement?
It's a great looking car.
Now, Sony has quite a track record in consumer electronics, obviously less so in the vehicle department. Would you take a chance on a Sony car?
That's a tough decision. I would.
You would be the beta, early adopter, beta tester?
Yeah.
Wow, look at you, Will. It's incredible. You just bought yourself a car. That's all it took. Well, anyway, they still say they have no intentions of turning the concept into a production vehicle. But the Vision S has arrived in Tokyo for advancing our sensing and audio technologies. The prototype vehicle is also currently under development for public road testing this fiscal year. So it's unclear as to why, Will, you would be road testing a car that you have no plans on releasing. But one way to read this is that this car they have no plans of releasing, but not any car. Maybe when they finally come out with it, it'll just be called something else, not the Vision S, and it'll have some small modifications, and they'll say, here is Sony Car Z dash HXY7, like every other Sony product name.
Or are they partnering up, like looking to partner up?
Maybe. Or maybe they feel that there's some technologies they could learn about in the form of this car that could make it into other products. But it seems like a stretch to me. This looks like a really nicely finished product. Mm-hmm. It looks even beyond what a typical prototype would be like. It looks ready for prime time. So I don't know. I'm going with what I said previously. If I have to guess, I can't imagine they're not interested in automobiles at all. I just think that a lot of the language right now is around this specific one and not electric vehicles in general for Sony. Also in electric vehicles, GMC is teasing its 1,000 horsepower electric Hummer truck and SUV. So they put out a new commercial with LeBron James. You remember the original happened at the Super Bowl, and they put this silhouette in the recent commercial for the pickup truck, which that's an interesting shape. Mm-hmm. It's like traditional truck plus Cybertruck almost. And of course, it's just a silhouette. We can't read too much into it, but it should be really powerful. 1,000 horsepower. They promise a 0 to 60 time in under 3 seconds. It's also the only electric truck you can get that's endorsed by LeBron James. So that's pretty important to note. They mention a couple of different modes, including a type of crawl mode, I presume, which is called crab mode, just a guess, and an adrenaline mode, which that sounds like a fast mode. It also apparently will have super fast charging, next-gen Super Cruise, ultra vision cameras, and it's going to have Ultium batteries, which is a partnership between GM and LG. So unlike Tesla, who's working with Panasonic, they're going to work with LG. And apparently those batteries are going to power both the Hummer EV as well as that really high-end Cadillac we were talking about, the Lyriq. You remember that conversation about a premium Cadillac electric vehicle coming out? So anyway, they're trying to get you pumped about the Hummer EV. And I've told you before, the trucks, they appear to be the battleground for our electric future. There's so many cool-looking trucks coming out, electric trucks to choose from. Hummer's saying theirs is the only super truck. I don't know what quantifies a super truck, but they're going to do both. So they'll have the truck and the SUV. Apparently, the truck isn't going to be as huge as some or the SUV isn't going to be as huge as some had originally imagined. Because if you recall, the previous Hummer was enormous.
Yeah.
This one apparently only a little bit bigger than the Bronco. So maybe going after a different market. We'll see. And the last vehicle of the day and the last story of the day, we have the Lamborghini Essenza SCV12, the most powerful track-ready Lambo yet. Nothing electric about this one. You are looking at a V12 naturally aspirated engine. That thing is bubbling and rumbling and brrr. You know, Will? You know what I'm saying? So those still exist, probably not for not much longer, but this one got me going because the body work on this thing is just, well, it's absolutely bananas. Look at the angles and the downforce. Yeah. This is a track car. They say it creates more downforce than where is the quote here? Than a GT3 car. It will produce more downforce than a GT3 car. Lamborghini claims that the front splitter and massive adjustable carbon fiber rear wing assist will be responsible for that massive downforce. It's going to have 819 horsepower, again, generated the old-fashioned way by drinking fuel. But I mean, you and I would have no idea what to do with something like that. But man, you pull up in something like that, it's video game. That's a video game. That doesn't even look like real life. You know it's going to be so uncomfortable in there. You're going to be so low to the ground. The engine is going to be rattling your brain. However, when you pull up in this thing, every single person in the vicinity is going to look at you.
Yeah.
I can guarantee it. I don't even know if you can drive this thing on the road. Let me tell you something crazy about it. There's only going to be 40 of these. 40 customers will be able to pick one of these up. They don't list the price here. I'm guessing it's about $1 billion. Bezos should have no problem picking up one of the last V12 zero electrification. I don't think he's into cars, but if he was, he could pick up all 40 of these things.